Norway Chess 2017 is the strongest tournament of the year. Some people are saying that it's arguably one of the strongest tournaments of all time. It features more or less the top 10 players in the world. Of course, there's number one on the rating list and world champion Magnus Carlsen playing on home turf. Then we have, well, in rating order, Wesley So, who's playing very, very well. He's the in-form player. Vladimir Kramnik, Fabiano Caruana, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, Aronian, Anand, Nakamura, Karyakin and Geary. It's an extraordinary field. I think this tournament comes at a very interesting time because Carlsen, of course, he's number one on the rating list, but by only 20 points, the gap between his rivals has been far greater. And this year, he's played two serious tournaments. Vaikonze, where he came second, and then the Grenka Classic, where he came second as well. So I think he feels the need to prove himself. Of course, he's fantastically competitive. He would very much like to win this tournament, to reassert his dominance in the chess world. But his rivals are getting closer. Now, to decide the pairings, they have a Blitz tournament. So this was played this evening. And, well, of course, it only decides the pairings. It has no other bearing on the tournament. However, it gives an indication of who's in form and will give the players some confidence if they do well. Well, for Magnus Carlsen, it could not have gone any better. He won it with a fantastic score of 7.5 out of 9, and that was 2 points ahead of his nearest rivals, Nakamura and Aronian, who both scored 5.5. So, well, I wanted to look at just a couple, well, 3 games, if we have time, from Magnus Carlsen. Just some snippets. Someone very wise once said, I think it was Miguel Najdorf, who once said one should never analyse Blitz games. But, well, okay, I'm going to do it anyway. Let's have a quick look. Well, Carlsen drew his first 2 games. And then in round 3, he tripped up Anish Giri. Of course, they have quite a needly relationship. Here Carlsen has broken through with his rooks. They look very good. And his knights look pretty good, particularly this knight here in the middle, blocking out black's rooks. So understandably, Giri played bishop h6 to drive away the knight. However, this has a tactical flaw. Carlsen pounced with this very attractive move, knight d5, hitting the queen. Of course, that knight can't be taken because of rook takes queen. And as well as attacking the queen, the knight threatens a nasty knight fork on f6. And that is basically game over after queen b3. Carlsen won one of the rooks, and it was all plain sailing from there. Very easy win. So that was Carlsen's first win. I think his best game was played in round 5. He had black against Sergei Karyakin, of course, his challenger in the World Championship match in November 2016. Carlsen played the Dutch defence with this move f5. Now, this is quite a risky opening because, of course, it can open up black's king. Carlsen's old trainer, Simon Agdestein, used to play the Dutch. This was an old favourite of his, so perhaps Carlsen is going back to his childhood. Knight c6, slightly unusual move here. But, well, let's see how things worked out. So b6, Carlsen looking to bring this bishop into the game, maybe on a6, maybe on b7. Now a5, yep, that gives the bishop some cover, and sometimes you could advance the pawn. So there we go, bishop a6. So this bishop peering over into Karyakin's position. Knight f4, so this is good move, of course, hitting these two pawns, so that had to be exchanged off. And knight e4, so that blocks out this important light-squared bishop. So it's a very unusual position, actually. Karjakin would like to get rid of that knight to put some pressure on that pawn, but f3 is a pretty ugly move because that would block out the bishop. So instead, what he does is he trades off that knight and then plays f3. Now, at first glance, this looks very attractive because if this pawn is exchanged off, then suddenly the queen comes into play. There's room for the rook to swing across. I mean, this looks really excellent with pressure on these pawns. But Carlsen invested a few seconds thinking time here, and he found this move, which at first looks very odd because look at white's centre. Incredible centre. But the problem is that actually this rook is out of play just for a moment, while black's pieces are all in play, and there's suddenly pressure on that pawn. And for that reason, black is actually okay here. So Karjakin played this move. Very interesting idea. So he's using a pin, but now Carlsen hit him with a4. What was impressive about Carlsen's play is that he never really ruminated for too long. He played his ideas incredibly quickly. He was seeing tactics incredibly quickly, putting so much pressure on his opponents. Now, the reason for giving up this pawn was to get the queen off this diagonal, but also to lure it onto the line of the rook, so that opens up the attack on the queen. And it looks very strange to put the bishop here. It doesn't win material, but it exchanges off this important bishop, which was protecting the king. Now the king is a bit more exposed. And this is a great move. Knight a5, so this knight wants to swing into this beautiful square on c4. Of course, this can't be taken because the rook could be snatched there. And suddenly everything is going Carlsen's way. So rook c3. Now, got to be careful. We would like to play the knight in, but suddenly rook takes knight, and there's a pin here. That rook can't be taken. So Carlsen played d4. Excellent move. e5. That pawn was threatened. Well, this pawn chain looks impressive, but actually, now just look at this diagonal, an open diagonal towards the king. So knight c4. This is a great move. Beautiful move. Carlsen saw this so quickly. So if rook takes knight, then queen d5 check. There you go. Double attack will win the rook. So the rook swung back. Suddenly this knight looks absolutely beautiful. Well, Carlsen didn't play here because that would allow queen b3 check to win the knight. But instead he just locked that bishop out of the game. So that beautiful pawn chain, you can see that bishop just bites on granite there. And now black just dominates. That rook still completely out of play. So the bishop dropped back. And now Carlsen in complete control in the centre. This is wonderful. So that's very awkward, this pin. So the king steps out, but the king not particularly secure. So Carlsen just playing pieces into the middle. What a picture of central control. And this is just ugly. Now rook up the board. So suddenly there's a mating attack threatened against the king. So that's why the queen had to block in order to allow the king to come back. But now this endgame is hopeless for white. This pawn just powering through for a touchdown. And now that's a deadly pin. Of course, the bishop can't move because the rook will be taken. And, well, that's the end of the game. This bishop is lost, and then the knight will come in to hit the rook, and then the pawn will go through. That was a really powerful game from Magnus Carlsen. Let me just show you one more of his games. and this was against Fabiano Caruana. And Carlsen plays this so-called Jobava system, this idea with knight c3 and bishop f4, a great favourite of Georgia Grandmaster Bahadur Jobava. And I think Bahadur, a very enterprising, aggressive player, would have been very proud of Carlsen's g4. This showed so much confidence from the world champion. Not necessarily objectively very good, launching these kingside pawns forward like this. It's a very risky idea, but it's very enterprising. Caruana gains territory on the other side of the board and has a decent centre, but Carlsen just keeps ploughing on. It's very confident. He really wasn't thinking very long over his moves at all, whereas Caruana was hesitating more over his moves. This was played in round 8 when Carlsen was almost guaranteed first place already. So he's managed to get his bishop to this wonderful square, but Caruana has counterplay with the knight, and this opens up the bishop's diagonal. So it's actually still very double-edged position. And now this, I think, was an excellent move from Caruana. If he doesn't play this, then this bishop really dominates and sometimes h6 threatens. And his idea, of course, he's not going to be able to castle kingside, but he wants to castle queenside. Carlsen plays h6. This is to undermine this pawn on f6, undermine the pawn chain. But Caruana escapes with his king and seems absolutely safe. Now, this next move of Carlsen's, I think, is very impressive. Now, I think many people would just kind of think, well, this opening experiment hasn't gone very well, so, well, let's just trade off queen, something like this. And, well, black is probably a little bit better with his two bishops, but maybe white is okay here. But no, Carlsen played almost without hesitation queen here. He kept the game complicated. He never backed down at all. So this allows Caruana to take this pawn in the middle, which looks very dangerous considering that white's king is still in the middle. And then Carlsen followed up with this extraordinary move, rook d1, hitting the queen, allowing the bishop to be taken. But now he's slammed down with the queen, checking the king. King comes up, queen f7 check. Now, if Caruana had wanted a draw, he could have ducked back with the king, and then a draw would result. But, I mean, maybe he was spooked by some kind of ideas of taking on g7, who knows. He could also have stepped up the board with his king and allowed that rook to be taken. And then there's this extraordinary move, bishop c5. In fact, black's king is safe here. Suddenly this is threatened, and mate is threatened. Well, white can survive with this move, but I mean, this is an incredibly double-edged position. Black should be okay there, incredibly. But instead, here, well, Caruana obviously just had overload here. He played instead bishop in the way. Clearly he was trying to open up the e-file. Let's try and get at white's king, but after this and pawn takes, it is hopeless. So this pawn storm came good, because if rook here, then you can simply trade everything off. Very simple, and then you get a queen. So in this position, well, in fact, black is utterly lost here. Caruana exchanged and then played rook g8. But this knight can cover the king, that's one thing. And now the queen comes in, check, and queen takes rook. Game over. So a crushing victory for Magnus Carlsen there. And, well, as I said, he completely dominated this Blitz tournament, won it with 7.5 out of 9. So that will give him enormous confidence going into round 1 of Norway chess. Do join me for my daily roundups. They'll be appearing, well, sometimes on the evening of the games, but it's more likely the next morning. But anyway, do watch out for them. Thanks for watching. It's going to be a great tournament.